Okay, good day, everyone. I would like to first introduce myself. My name is Maria Hemmelberg, and as you can see in the slide presentation, I'm a certified English teacher with a master's in curriculum instruction. I'm also an AP capstone director at the school I currently am working at, and a choice navigator, which is basically a fancy word for career or college advisement. I have been in the education field since 2002, and I have been familiar with homeschooling since roughly 2005. I have six kids, three older boys, which I homeschooled from kinder all the way to college. One's a dentist, the other is in dental school, and the other one is in law school. My fourth child is a girl, and she was homeschooled all the way until eighth grade. And we then transitioned her to a magnet school for dance. She then transferred to a private school her junior year, and she is currently a senior and will be pursuing a dance major at FSU, which is difficult for us since she will be the first one to actually go away for undergrad as opposed to staying local. My last two babies are 8 and 6, and they both attend a private school where they are enrolled in a Spanish immersion program. So basically, all of this, a long introduction, is to say that I have vast experience in all forms of education. And the following presentation is meant to clarify basically what is homeschool and how you can go about it. That you're seeing right now, we have a little bit of the history of homeschooling, just so you can get an idea of what it was like, school was like in the States from the beginning. So we have here in the first bullet, you see that the colonial era to the 19th century basically was very home-based, what we would call homeschooling, right? It was small, local, and parents, tutors, they all, clergy, had a basic and important role in forming the child's education. As we moved on to the late 1900s and the 20th century, that's when compulsory schooling laws were enacted. And think about the time where kids, Industrial Revolution, and kids were made to work. And so it became law, that children had to go to school, they could not work, which was a great thing. And that's when, across all states, public schooling started becoming the norm, right? And it reduced homeschooling significantly. Then we moved to the 60s, 1960s, 1970s, and that's really where the modern homeschooling movement began. A lot of people equated or used to equate homeschooling with like the hippie movement, right? Because that's around the same time that this was taking place. And during this time, reformers like John Holt criticized a traditional homeschooling and really promoted child-led learning or more individualized learning, which was impossible in a public school setting. Excuse me. Um, then we have in 1980 and the 1990s the legal battles and advocacy to make homeschooling actually legal in all 50 states, which it eventually did become legal. And this was championed by both conservatives and secular educational reformers. And then we come to 2000s and the present. It really, homeschooling has taken a growth in these last few years. I want to say in the last 10 to 15, with a great increase occurring after the pandemic because we kind of were all forced to homeschool to a certain extent. Okay, so in this slide right here, we have the little school graphic right there, and I want to take some time to explain to you basically how homeschooling works. So when you think here of this little house that's there, we're going to label this the school, right? This will be the traditional school. And in a traditional school, you have the principal, right? That pretty much runs the school to a certain extent, right? And then we have a counselor that usually does either course selection or mental health. We have coaches. Those are the ones where you have the football, the dance, the cheerleading, right? All those coaches are all hired by the school, right? Like the school is this entity that hires all these people. And then of course, very important. We have teachers, which are the ones that are educating the kids, right? So these are all the people that like, these are the stakeholders, right, that are part of the school. A school, aside from all these people, they also have um, curriculum and instruction, right? Uh, curricular curriculum and instruction, which are basically the plans that are followed, the scope and sequence of the school. This is where you have like pacing guides and the people that decide what books are going to be read, what textbooks are going to be used, um, and all those, things. This usually comes from upper. This sometimes comes from the school board, let's say, right? Um, and so this is what a traditional school environment looks like. When you homeschool, okay, so this is going to be my homeschool, right? When you homeschool, things now fall under you. So basically, what you're telling um, the district is saying, listen, I think I know what's best for my child. And so I don't need the guidance of the school. Like, I don't need this necessarily, right? Like, this guidance right here, um, I don't want. Like, I don't, not that you don't want the guidance, but you don't want to have go under that particular model. So then you, the parent, so let me change the color here. So now you, the parent, are basically the school. That means you get to choose the rules under which the school will be run, um, that, schedule, recess, days off, days of work. All of that falls under you. You are now the principal. You are now also the counselor, right? Or you're basically the one deciding who's going to be the counselor. So here, let's say your child goes to therapy. Okay, you are choosing where he goes to therapy. You are choosing who is going to counsel your child. We also have coaches, right? Just like in school. But now you are choosing who's the coach. So you're choosing, let's say, you're gonna play sports. So the sports club, you're gonna choose that. You're gonna choose when the kid does PE, how the kid does PE, if it's gonna be through dance, if it's gonna through a fitness class, if you're gonna get a gym membership for this, right? Like, you are making those choices. You're also making the choices of the teachers. Okay, that means you can be the primary teacher, or you may not feel confident in certain areas, and so you are going to hire a teacher. Because remember, you, the parent, are the school, pretty much, right? Let me see if this actually works. Okay, you, the parent, right, are now they're taking on the role of the school. Okay, so that means that, let's say you want to hire a math teacher, right? Because you don't feel comfortable doing math. So you hire the math teacher. Let's say your kids are, doing chemistry. You don't know chemistry. So you're going to hire, let's say, um, what's that platform that a lot of kids use? OutSchool. Okay, you want to hire OutSchool for a chem teacher. Okay, that's your decision. You are also in charge of curriculum, right? And everything that falls under testing, right? All of this falls under you. Basically, meaning that just like in the school system and the school board and entities within the school plan the curriculum, the pacing guides, now that's your job. So you decide what you want to test, when you want to test. So homeschool is not bound by state test, standardized test. You could literally homeschool a kid without never giving them the standardized test. Now, is that recommended? I personally wouldn't recommend it as an education someone in education is a professional education. I wouldn't recommend that. But truly, you don't. The kid does not. If that was your prerogative, you don't have to. Okay. All of this to say, because I think a lot of parents get confused with this thing. Oh, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? You choose. You choose if you want to have grades, right? So, for example, schools aside, teachers aside, what's an A? What's a B? Right? You decide how are you going to grade a kid? Are you going to do pass fail? Are you going to have letter grades? Okay, that's up to you. I always advise parents go with the grading system simply because if your kid wants to go to college or if your kid ever wants to go back to school of some sort, private or public, you want to have as much similarity with the school system as you can. That's my advice, right? You also decide, like I said, the time that school's in session, right? So breaks, right? Just like school takes breaks, you decide your break, okay? But that means you decide whether you do school the whole year, whether you take the summers off, whether you want to take a week in the middle of February off. That's up to you. You decide the length of the day, the scheduling of the day. Everything now falls on you. You are now responsible for everything in in your child's education. Now you can sub-hire, right? You can sub-hire teachers and counselors and coaches, right? To help you. You're going to purchase curriculum. You can use platforms such as FLVS if you want. Those are all things you can use. You make the choice. But a misconception a lot of people have is that homeschooling is something you can pass on to somebody else, like pass the baton on to somebody else. And that's not how it works. You are 100% responsible for your child's schooling. So whenever you see these programs that they're being offered that they tell you, oh, we'll do the schooling for you, that's not true. You are still responsible for all the documentation, for all the documentation and all the overseeing of your child's schooling. And I make emphasis on this because I hold homeschooling dearly in my heart, and I would hate for Florida to tighten up the rope or make it difficult for parents to homeschool because some parents don't do it right and abuse the system. But all in all, this is, hopefully this wasn't very confusing, but a sketch of what homeschooling is from the parent's point of view. Okay, so now that I explained to you pretty much what homeschooling is or the model or what it's supposed to be, let's go a little bit in depth about what homeschooling in Florida is like. So in order to homeschool in Florida, there are some legal parameters that you need to go through. So the legal framework and flexibility, as you can see in the first bullet, is that Florida has permitted homeschooling since 1985, and parents can choose from three options to homeschool. You can establish a home education program by submitting a one-time notice of intent to the local superintendent, and that is when you do the model that I just showed you, where you are overseeing the program and you choose the teachers, the coaches, the counselors, and so on. You can also enroll your child in a private school that offers a home-based program, which they usually call it an umbrella school. But even when you do that, you are responsible to oversee your child's day-to-day schooling. Or you can also hire a private tutor with a valid Florida teaching certificate. That is a very rare scenario, is not as cost efficient, but it's something you can do. But the most traditional way that people homeschool in Florida is the first bullet. The second bullet tells you that under the home education option, parents are required to maintain a portfolio of educational records and have their child's progress evaluated annually. There's no specific curriculum mandates, subject requirements, or teacher qualifications for parents. So like I said previously, you don't have to choose a certain curriculum. You choose what subjects, what areas you're going to teach your child, when you're going to teach it, pretty much anything, right? You can, if you want to do Bible, you can do Bible. If you don't want to do Bible, you don't want to do Bible. But basically, this is all up to you. You are the one in charge of the education. But you do need to keep a portfolio, which includes samples of the work they've done, um, grades they've gotten, activities they've done. And you need to keep a record of it for 2 years. And they also need to be evaluated at the end of the year. Homeschool students in Florida also have access to various educational resources and programs. Aside from your co-ops and everything else that you can do on the side, homeschool students in Florida are allowed to take dual enrollment classes in college, which basically means if your child passes the PERT or an ACT, SAT, they could enroll in a college level class, I think once they are in sixth grade and above. So, for example, your kid is excellent in reading, passes the score that's needed, you can enroll your kid in English ANC 1101 in college, okay? And it is free. There's funds that go through that. And I'm going to make a little parenthesis here. For those of you that are under the Step Up scholarship, you know how you get money and you have to pay for the classes out of your money. Dual enrollment, and for example, if you get the Step Up money, you can't, for example, do FLVS for free, right? So dual enrollment is different because those are different funds. So you can do Step Up, the scholarship, and still do dual enrollment for free. Okay, so that is a great, I always tell parents, if your kid is college bound, you definitely want to take advantage of dual enrollment program. Okay, you can also participate in Florida Bright Futures. As long as you have the test scores, you don't need the GPA requirement because guess what? Homeschoolers are exempt from that because if you decide as a parent, let's say to do pass fail, you wouldn't have a GPA requirement. And I'm pretty sure they think at this point GPA with homeschoolers will be like anybody could inflate it, right? But you do have to have the other requirements, which are the community service hours and the testing requirement. But they are eligible for Florida Bright Futures, which if you're not familiar with that, is a scholarship that pays 75 or 100% of Florida public colleges. Now, the 100% is not really 100% because it's 100% of a amount they give. But anyways, it covers a lot. Okay. They are also eligible for school vouchers, such as the Step Up Scholarship, the Family Empowerment Scholarship that I previously mentioned. And they also have access to public school classes. It is at the district's and the school discretion. But for example, let's say you're teaching your kid English, history, math, and science, but you really want him to take the PE, and he's really good at art, and there's an art class that would be just phenomenal in his local public school, high school, or school of any type. You can go and speak with the principal. It's up to the principal, the school's discretion, if they will allow them. But they by law, they can take, I believe, up to two, because this has to be part-time classes at a public school. It's something you can keep in mind. Okay, so now to our final slide. We're on the slide that we're going to discuss on how to begin homeschooling in Florida. And in reality, like I mentioned before, Florida is one of those states that has it really good for homeschooling families. So the first thing you need to do is submit a notice of intent. Now, depending on the county you're in, Broward, Dade, they have different forms sometimes, or you can just write a letter and basically stating, I intend to homeschool my son or daughter, I'm going to be taking them out of public school, blah, 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 and date it, send it. It's usually through email that you can do these things now. And then you start your homeschooling journey. As you start your homeschooling journey, it is very important that you maintain a portfolio. And I had mentioned that before. What exactly is a portfolio? Well, if you are testing them, giving them any standardized tests, copies of the standardized testing, any schoolwork they've done, sample worksheets, sample pages, sample projects, pictures of projects. Let's say you decided to do a science class and you went to the Deering Bay and you're studying mangroves. And so you are pictures of that and you have the activities. And so you keep all of that in a portfolio. No, you do not need to keep everything. You're not going to be asked to show everything. It is very rare. I think in all my years homeschooling and dealing with the homeschool population, I've had maybe one or two families that were, as called, or they were, asked to show proof of their homeschooling. But regardless, keep it for 2 years, keep the records, especially because when you're going to do the next bullet, which is have the annual evaluation, the teacher should require it. Uh, to the evaluation, this is kind of a muddy subject for me, simply because in order to evaluate, and you need to have a yearly evaluation, remember. So in order to have the yearly evaluation, you can get it from one, a certified Florida teacher, two, a psychologist or another approved method, which a counselor of some sort, and they need to be certified because the form requires that they put their number, or a nationally normed student achievement test. So for example, if your kid takes the SAT, you can submit that in lieu of an evaluation. Not highly recommended, this portion, because I don't think you want all that data being sent to the homeschooling division of your county, but up to individual. The most common one that people use is a certified Florida teacher. Now, prices for that range from, I mean, I don't even know, but more than the price, please choose an evaluator that values education, meaning someone that is not just willing to sign their name, give you a go, but it's actually assessing what you've been doing and can really say, yeah, your kid should advance to the next level, or no, your kid did not advance to the next level. And that's okay. But I think finding an evaluator that knows about education, knows about the homeschool journey, and understands everything is different, right? Because I've done evaluations where parents are very honest, be like, you know what, we didn't finish the science curriculum, and that's okay. In public schools and private schools, they don't finish it either many times. So that's okay. Um, what wouldn't be okay is you trying to seek out an evaluation when your child has only done one lesson in math, one semester of English, and called it a day, right? Because if your homeschool hopefully is for the enrichment and the betterment of your child, and that means you need to oversee it and make sure that your child is doing it, right? Some sort of schooling. Okay, so you have your annual evaluation. After the annual evaluation, it is your responsibility to submit the evaluation. And that is where it comes the importance of having a certified teacher that understands homeschooling. Because if the teacher is like, oh, sure, I'll do it, and never gives it to you, and even she is not allowed to, or he is not allowed to submit it. Any teacher that submits an evaluation for a child, it will be kicked back. Because remember, the teacher is an employee that you hire, because you, the parent, are the principal, you, the parent, are the teacher, you, the parent, are the counselor, you, the parent, are the school. So just like schools send transcripts out, it's the school. Your child's teacher doesn't send out a transcript. You don't send out a transcript. The school, the entity, sends out the transcript. Same case here. You get the evaluation. You hire a certified teacher to do it. But once they give it to you, they have to give it to you, then you submit that to the district. Okay? Also, you need to keep your records for 2 years in case you get asked for it, and just it's good to do it. And then you submit a notice of termination if or when you stop homeschooling. So I submitted a notice of termination when my kid reached senior year because he was done with his schooling. I did it all throughout. And when my daughter was going to start school as a ninth grade, I submitted a notice of termination. It's really up to you when you submit it, if you submit it. But you need to submit it at one point when you finish your homeschooling journey, whether it's in grade 12 or any other grade. Okay, so this next slide, it's questions, but obviously this is not a live chat like I've done before. But some of the questions that were submitted and some of the questions that get asked a lot, I'm going to try to answer it as best as possible. One of those is, what about my kid that's ESC? What about my kid that doesn't do traditional schooling? Perfect. That is why you chose a homeschooling journey, because you want to cater it to your child. So perhaps the progress of your child is not that they learned how to add and subtract, read and write, but the process maybe is that they learned to ask to go to the bathroom on themselves, or they learned to button their shirt and put up their pants, depending on disability. Or if your child, let's say, has ADHD, school is not going to look the same for him as if he didn't. So maybe you have extended breaks. Perhaps you do school 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, and you call it a day, right? So all of those things are exactly why homeschooling uh, became a movement, right? To cater to the specific needs of children. So if you have a kid that has some sort of learning disability, or like I always tell people, part of the spectrum, right, of everything that a kid can be in terms of learning, there's also the gifted kid that is highly advanced or thinks differently, that's also for that kid. So that kid, maybe you need to give them more manipulatives, maybe you need to give them a different curriculum, and that is why you're homeschooling. So yes, remember, you're the school, you're the principal, you're the teacher. So you get to decide what you do, how you do it, how often you do it, and when you do it for your child. Another question that I get asked is like, I am so lost. I don't know how to do this. Can I just hire someone to do it? Yes, you can hire individuals to help you. You can hire a camp teacher. In the case, let's say, of a child that needs ABA therapy, yes, you can hire a therapist or take your child to a center for half a day. Of course, you can do that. But remember, they are not in charge of keeping the record of your child's schooling. You are. So if you hire a teacher, a tutor, or you take your child somewhere for therapy, you need to make sure you're collecting all the data, you're collecting and you're overseeing. Because now, as a homeschool parent, you are not just the school and the teacher and the no. Now you decided to, as the entity, sub, what do you call it? Not sublease, but hire, sub-hire people to do that job, and that's fine. But now you need to oversee it like a principal would, or like the school would, right? You oversee that the teachers are doing what they're supposed to do, that the curriculum is on par. So you're still overseeing your child's education. Uh, Other questions that tend to arise are, what about, do I need to follow particular guidelines, or I want to homeschool, but I also don't want to go like do anything, it's pull it out of a hat. I need some guidance, I need some structure. To those parents, I always tell them, online you can find, let's say if you're in high school, the high school requirements, right? For your district, more or less they should have pacing guides, so you know more or less what a child should or not be doing. But if not, you can also hire someone like me or anybody else that you know that does this for a living, where they can sit down and guide you and tell you, okay, what are your goals? Okay, what do you want out of this? Okay, these are the curriculum that I suggest. This is the things that I suggest. This is a sample schedule. This is a sample. And then you go from there, because I know it can be very daunting. That part could be very daunting. Another question that it's frequently asked is, so how does the dual enrollment process work, right? That's a whole other lecture. That's a whole other topic. But just know that if you contact your local public community college or public university, they should be able to guide you. There's a lot of things that they ask. Some are unnecessary, and then again, that's where you need to hire a professional to see if you're going around the right way. But in reality, you can arm yourself with so much information online. It is time consuming, right? So when you hire someone, you're trying to forego that, right? The time consuming of having to read it and investigate it and doing all of that. But you could definitely do this yourself. All these things that I'm talking to you about, they're online, right? There's lots of resources online that you can find. Um, a lot of people also ask for co-ops. There's many co-ops. I don't know them all, and depending on the county, because I'm from Miami, but if you go like to your Facebook page and you find homeschooler groups, for once, like for an example, there's lots of feedback that you can get. There are lots of groups that they'll be sharing, and you can kind of mix and try, right? Mix and try. Some are a hit, some are not. I remember with my kids, we did PACE, and we did Vessels of Gold. It was like a performance group, but my kids kind of grew out of some of that. So then they started doing dual enrollment, and they just did things on their own. The beauty of homeschooling is that it allows you so much freedom. I always tell people my second one, the one that's now in dental school, I didn't even really think he was going to go to dental school. I really thought he was either going to be a vet, an artist, or in business, because he loved drawing. And when he was around 14 and 15, he made a whole enterprise out of breeding and selling hololop bunnies, the one with the floppy ears. And he was only 14. And this was back when Craigslist was a thing, because I mean, social media wasn't even as you know ubiquitous as it is now. But it afforded him the time to like build the hutches and take care of the animals and do all of this while still doing school, because it would take him 4 hours to do his schoolwork and then he would use the rest of the time to do that. So homeschool affords you so many things that I think you can explore and take advantage of. And the last question that I always get is, how do I know if I should homeschool, or what do you think? Do you recommend I homeschool? And that is such a personal question, because I think homeschooling really is something that it's up to the individual family, up to the individual parent, up to the individual child almost. You need to know if it is fitting for your family. And what I tell a lot of people is, if you want to homeschool and you want to do it successfully, the first thing you need to make sure is that there's discipline in your household, that your kids obey you and respect you and honor you. Because it is very difficult to tell a kid that doesn't respect your authority, sit down and do the work. Complete this assignment. No, you cannot do X until you do math. No, we will not be doing Y until you finish your reading. So I always tell parents that that's something to keep in mind when they are starting the homeschooling journey, that that's feasible for them. But I also think that if you're able to do it, it is a beautiful journey. If you are able to homeschool, it is a blessing for many families. And I do encourage you to find guidance if you need, and hire a professional if you need help with building the curriculum, navigating the system of some sort, when it comes time to college advisement, right? Because that runs when they enter high school. That's when there's again another a whole other conversation, another a whole other, I guess, slides that we should do. But basically, that goes all into aligning what you're doing in homeschool with what colleges want to see, with how to navigate the steps. Um, but all in all, to me, is my pleasure to do this. It is really my passion, not just because it's education, but because homeschooling to me afforded me so many blessings to me and my family. I really think my kids were able to do grad school the way they were because of how they were molded in homeschool, because of all we were able to do. They were able to finish, they all finished their high school with an AA, with their associate's degree, because they were able to do all these dual enrollment classes and still shadow and still do projects and still do sports. It was a blessing for our family. The time we were able to spend, together. There was no rushing. There was no lunch boxes to be made. There was, no homework to be done after like hours in school. So it depends. Now I'm in a different stage of my life. Now I actually have my little ones in school. So, it's a different dynamic. But I do hope that this was very helpful for all of you. If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out. I will try to leave on the next slide my information. And I hope that I've encouraged you, that I've answered a little bit of your questions, and that I've clarified a little bit of the doubts and of the confusion about what homeschooling is. And I hope that all of you are blessed by this, and I hope that I'm able to, encourage you all in the future, maybe one-on-one or even through these presentations. Have a great day.